Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bean on the Scene. I am Alma Bean, and it's time for college football. We are finally here for week one of the college football season. And I know what you're thinking. There was week zero games, but like you said, week zero. So we want to focus on the games that are going to appeal to the audience here in Utah. And we're going to start that off with BYU. They will be at home versus Portland State at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. That game, it will be on ESPN Plus. So if you want to check it out at that time, by all means, go for it. The KSL Sports Zone, they will have their pregame and postgame show for that game as well. According to ESPN Analytics, BYU does have a 99% chance of winning that game. So it should be fairly easy for them. But Portland State also played in week zero last week against Tarleton State, where they lost 42-0. So for anyone that may have had any sort of worry for this game, I wouldn't. But, crazier things have happened. I remember when I was watching the Florida Gators play the Georgia Southern Eagles. I believe that's their mascot. And they ended up losing at Florida. So crazy things can happen. But let's talk about this roster here, because BYU this week, they officially put out their depth chart. So now fans will know exactly who's going to be out on the field. So man, we are struggling with talking today. But first player we're going to talk about is Bear Bachmeier. The highly touted true freshman quarterback that was originally committed to Stanford and then transferred to BYU, won the starting job for quarterback. He was an absolute monster in high school, and hopefully BYU is going to be able to see that side of him for this upcoming year. I don't doubt that we will. And, when you have a quarterback wearing the number 47, you're going to see some crazy things. Next up, you got their running back, LJ Martin, who had 137 carries, 718 rushing yards, and 7 touchdowns last season. He's coming back from injury, so we'll see if there is potentially a little bit of a setback for him. But BYU, I'm sure that they will be just fine with him coming back. Then the All Big 12 wide receiver, Chase Roberts, coming back after last year getting 52 receptions, 854 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. Then being joined with Parker Kingston with 13 receptions, 196 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. And then JoJo Phillips, who had 10 receptions, 211 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. That receiving core, I believe that Bear Bachmeier is going to be set up for success, especially with a head down running back like LJ Martin. I don't think Bachmeier is going to have too much to struggle with. And as you noticed, I didn't mention his brother, Tiger. I believe that there will be certain packages that will have Tiger come out and play so you can really see their chemistry on the field. But as far as the best available and the depth chart that BYU put out, those will be your 3 wide receivers. Now for tight end, it'll be a familiar name for you Utes fans, as Carson Ryan won the tight end job after getting 10 receptions, 113 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown last season with Utah. Now for their line, you have Isaiah Jada and Waylon Lupuo, Bruce Mitchell, Austin Leusa, and Andrew Gentry. I don't think that they're going to have too much trouble having Bachmeier in the backfield, but Bear's going to look to run. And with how Jake Retzloff, how he played last year, it was a little more pocket centered. Yes, he could create when needed. But I'm just really curious how Bears play style will work with BYU's offensive line. Again, I have zero doubts that they're going to be successful, but it's going to be a bit of an adjustment, and I'm really excited to see how they do with that. Now, as far as the BYU defense, for defensive end, they had Viliami Po'ua, who had 7 solo tackles, 2 assisted. Nose tackle is former Ute Keanu Tanavasa, who had 8 solo tackles, 8 assists, 1 sack, and 4 pass deflections. And then also for their defensive tackle, I'm going to butcher this last name, and I apologize, but it's going to be John Taumui Piao. Probably said that way wrong, but he had 5 solo tackles, 7 assists, and 1 sack. And then for their ends, they had Logan Lutui, who had 7 solo tackles, 7 assists, 1 sack, 2 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. For your Sam, you have Isaiah Glasker, who had 42 solo tackles, 23 assists, 3.5 sacks, 4 pass deflections, 3 interceptions, with one of those resulting in a touchdown and 1 forced fumble. For your Mac linebacker, you had Siale Asira, who had 3 solo tackles, 2 assisted, and 1 sack. For your Rover linebacker, you had Jack Kelly with 33 solo, 17 assists, 5 sacks, 1 pass deflection, 1 interception, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 fumble recovery. For one of your safeties, you had Raider Demooney, who had 16 solo, 10 assists, 1 sack, and then Tanner Wall with 31 solo, 22 assists, 1 pass deflection, and 3 interceptions. But then you also have your nickel, which is Tommy Parasas, who had 12 solo, 8 assists, 1 interception, 1 fumble recovery, and a touchdown from that recovery. And then for your corners, you have Evan Johnson, who had 13 solo, 3 assists, 1 pass deflection, 2 interceptions, and Maury Bamba with 10 solo, 7 assists, and 4 pass deflections. You also have your specialists, where you have your punter, Sam Vanderhaar. Then for kickoff, place kicking, you have Will Farron, who last year was 41 for 41 with extra points, and then 24 for 27 for the field goals with a 54 long. So BYU, they are going to be in good hands. I, again, have zero doubts that they're going to be successful this year. It's just a matter of whether or not they can stay consistent. I mean, last year there were a lot of doubts on how their team was going to run, and they ended up being one of the best teams in the Big 12. So if they could do that with doubt, I'm curious how they can do with confirmation. Now, as far as their game for this upcoming Saturday, again, August 30th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time on ESPN Plus against Portland State. BYU has never lost to an FCS school during the Kalani Sitake era. Now, you're probably wondering, how many FCS schools have they played? They've played 8 of them, where they've won by a margin of 32.6 points per game and allowing 12.9 points per game. But over the last 6 games that they've had against FCS schools, they've allowed 10 plus points. So my prediction for this game, I believe BYU should win this pretty easily. But I believe the final score is going to be 52-30. Now, for your next game, next team, that is, you have Utah, who will be at UCLA at the Rose Bowl with kickoff at 9 p.m. Mountain Time on Fox, which, again, you will have your pregame and postgame shows on the KSL Sports Zone on 1280 AM, 97.5 FM. And for this game, the ESPN analytics are saying that Utah only has a 47.9% chance to win. So really a coin flip for this game. And then Kyle Whittingham, he never officially released the depth chart, but here is my projection for the starters. For their quarterback, it's Devin Dampier, who last year went 226 for 390 with 2,768 passing yards, 12 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, along with 155 carries with 1,166 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns. So you are definitely going to see more running with Dampier. I'm really curious if there's going to be more designed runs or if it's going to be more of a scan the field and make a decision. But this is going to be a completely different Utah team from what fans will be used to seeing. Along with Dampier, you have running back Wayshawn Parker, who had 137 carries for 735 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, along with 11 receptions, 108 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Wayshawn Parker, it does seem like there might be a 1-2 tandem in the backfield, but ultimately it just depends on how the game goes. But I do believe Wayshawn Parker will take a majority of those snaps. For wide receiver, you got Tobias Merriweather, who last year had 11 receptions, 125 receiving yards, and one receiving touchdown. Larry Simmons, who had 27 receptions for 421 receiving yards, one touchdown. And this one, I just believe that there's more potential. But I believe Creed Whitmore, who had four receptions for 65 receiving yards, one carry for 41 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown on that one carry. I do believe that he should be one of the starting wide receivers for Utah, but that's not my decision to make. I'm just here to watch and report on what's going on. Now, for the tight end position, it was kind of just pick a name, just because there isn't a lot to go off of as far as performance. But if you want to go off of tenure, spring ball, and performance in uh, camps, Dallin Bentley, I believe, should be the starting tight end, who last year had two receptions for 15 yards. And then you have your line, which is Caleb Lomu, Tanoa Lagai, Jaron Kump, Michael Mokofisi, and Spencer Fano. Now, when you have one of the top offensive linemen in Spencer Fano on your team, you know you're going to have a decent amount of protection on that right side. So it makes me really curious, again, if there are going to be designed runs for Dampier, knowing that Fano could potentially be a moving blocker. Um, it'd be really interesting to see that type of setup, but who knows what is cooking in the mind of Kyle Whittingham. Now, for their defense, you have Spencer's brother, Logan Fano, who last year had 15 solo tackles, 20 assists, 2.5 sacks, one pass deflection, one forced fumble, and one fumble recovery, along with John Henry Daly, who had 4 solo tackles and 1 sack. Then you have defensive tackle Aliki Dimahi, who had 4 solo tackles, 3 assists, 2 pass deflections. Then you have Dallas Vakalahi, who had 9 solo tackles, 7 assists, 2 sacks. Then your Mac linebacker, who is Lavani Damuni, which these stats came in 2023 since he did not play last year. He had 43 solo tackles, 44 assisted with half a sack. Your stud linebacker is going to be Lander Barton, who had 38 solo, 34 assists, 2 sacks, 4 pass deflections, 2 interceptions, with 1 resulting in a touchdown, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. Then your rover is going to be Jonathan Hall, who had 20 solo tackles, 18 assisted, 1 sack, 3 pass deflections, and 1 interception. Then for your corners, you have Scooby Davis with 21 solo, 8 assisted, 2 interceptions. Then Blake Cotton with 19 solo, 5 assisted, 2 pass deflections. Then Smith Snowden, who had 34 solo, 14 assisted, 8 pass deflections, 2 interceptions, with 1 being a touchdown and 1 forced fumble. Then for your safeties, you have Rabbit Evans with 20 solo, 14 assists, and 1 pass deflection, and Tao Johnson, who had 41 solo, 29 assisted, 4 pass deflections, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. Now, for your kickers, you're going to see a brand new face. He was one of the best kickers in the state of Utah, local boy from Murray High School, Dylan Curtis. Um, I will say Kyle Whittingham has spoken very highly of Curtis in practices and says that he has no doubt in his mind on how he can perform. Now it's a matter of how he'll perform under the bright lights at Rice Eccles Stadium, which is intimidating for anyone, whether you are in the crowd, on the field, whether it's high school, college. You are going to feel those bright lights in that stadium, and I am also very curious to see how he will perform. But if Whittingham trusts him, Utes fans should be able to trust him. But this game ultimately will be the battle of transferred quarterbacks, as Utah has Devin Dampier and UCLA has Nico Imalevea. Leva. Again, these Polynesian names, they are really rough to pronounce, especially if you are not used to saying those names. So again, I've butchered plenty. I apologize. But for UCLA's quarterback, you never want to ignore a quarterback that has SEC experience. But overall, it's going to be a fun game. It's going to be a late game. So if you really want to watch the Utes go out, play UCLA in the Rose Bowl, you're going to have to drink a cup of coffee or two to make sure that you are good. Or get your swig drink if you really need it. But as far as the prediction goes, a lot of these games between Utah and UCLA have been single score. I do believe that Utah will have a little bit of the upper hand. Um, but again, I do believe that this will be a one possession game as Utah comes out on top 27-21. Now, for the final D1 team here in Utah, you have Utah State, which they will be at home versus UTEP at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time on the CBS Sports Network. ESPN Analytics says that Utah State is projected to have a 75.1% chance of winning this game. And that one I found a little bit of a shock just because of how much turnover there has been with that football program. So I'm just really excited to see what will come of it. But if you do want to break down the roster that they currently have, uh, a big piece that's going to be returning is quarterback Bryson Barnes, who went 77 for 126, then 856 passing yards with 12 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions to go along with 68 carries, 530 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. Then you have running back Javen Jacobs, who had 40 carries, 277 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns to go along with 17 receptions, 130 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Then for their wide receivers, you have Demick Starling, who had 3 receptions for 56 receiving yards. Braden Keegan, which these stats are from 2023, he had 1 reception for 7 yards. And then Brady Boyd, who had 1 reception for 7 receiving yards as well. So you have a lot of untapped talent for their receiving core, which makes me a little more intrigued by this Aggies team because these guys haven't necessarily been able to prove what they're capable of doing from their previous stats. So being the guys that are going to be receiving the ball every single down, I'm excited to see what they can come up with. And then for their tight end, you have Brock Lane, who had 19 receptions for 197 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Then their offensive line consists of Trey Anderson, George Miley, Jimmy Liston, Tovo Motu Apuaka. Again, these poly names, I am so sorry for butchering these. And then finishing it off with Jake Eichhorn. Their defense, it's going to consist of nose tackle Gabriel Iniguez, who had 4 solo tackles, 25 assisted, and half a sack. Defensive tackle Tyree Morris, who had 32 solo, 31 assists, 2 sacks, 4 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. Then you have defensive end Anoka Migao, who had 2 assisted tackles. Your Will linebacker with William Holmes, who had 2 solo, 4 assists, 1.5 sacks. Sam linebacker is CJ Naismith, or if you're trying to look him up on any sort of website, it's Carl Naismith. He had 2 solo, 1 sack. Buck linebacker being John Miller with 29 solo, 23 assists, 2 sacks, and 2 pass deflections, along with Bronson Olivao, who had 14 solo, 8 assists, and 3.5 sacks. Your corners are going to be Noah Flores, 8 solo, 1 assist, 1 interception. Then you have Courage Ugo. If you try and find him, his last name is Ugo Chukwu. He only had a assisted tackle. And then your nickel is going to be Bryson Taylor, who had 28 solo, 29 assisted, and 10 pass deflections. Then for your safeties, you have Brevin Hamblin, who had 49 solo, 42 assisted, 2 pass deflections, and 2 forced fumbles. And Noah Avenger with 45 solo, 46 assisted, 5 pass deflections, and 1 interception. Now, with all of those names that I had listed, if I'm not mistaken, only 3 of those guys are returners. Whether they started last year, whether they were on the bench, a lot of these guys are transfers. So that's why I say that this game is going to be really interesting because you don't quite know what you're getting as a full unit from these guys. And this is going to be the first time they're going to be able to show off, and they're going to go up against a team like UTEP that I wouldn't say isn't a challenge, but it should be a team to where you can experiment a little bit, but they should still put up a pretty good fight for Utah State. Now for their kicker, they have Carter Brown, who was 8 for 8 for extra points last season, 3 for 5 for field goals with Cincinnati. Your punter is Landon Recco, And then your punt returner is Kahanu Davis, and kick returner is DJ Mays. So with this game, even though it is going to be very much about Utah State, you have to give credit to UTEP being able to get five-star recruit QB Malachi Nelson. He is no joke, and I mean, even though the rest of the minors roster isn't necessarily the best and not going to be too much to work against for the Aggies, but when you got a five-star recruit, if he lives up to that ranking, Utah State's defense is going to have a lot to work with. But ultimately, I do believe that Utah State will come out with the win, 35-24. Now, speaking of these guys that are getting great opportunities, we just finished the final week of preseason in the NFL. So I went ahead and looked at some guys that were on the cusp of making a roster that had Utah connections, and I wanted to see who made the cut and who didn't. So the guys that ended up making their teams were wide receiver Devon Vele, who used to play for the University of Utah. He was recently traded from the Denver Broncos to the New Orleans Saints, and he did end up making the Saints roster. Next, you have linebacker Tyler Batty from BYU, who made the Vikings roster. Cornerback Jacob Robinson, who is currently injured, but he did make the cut for the 49ers roster. Offensive tackle Caleb Etienne from BYU made the Bengals roster. Linebacker Karini Reed, who is undrafted. He used to play for Utah. He made the Denver Broncos roster. Linebacker Connor O'Toole from Utah made the Seahawks roster, which was, if I'm not mistaken, according to the preseason stats that I saw, he was one of the top linebackers in the NFL for the preseason. So really happy for him. Then you kind of have the gimmies like Jalen Royals, wide receiver from Utah State that was drafted by Kansas City. Quarterback Jackson Dart, who went to Corner Canyon, who's now with the New York Giants. Those ones were kind of givens. But then you have guys like linebacker Jeffrey Bassa, who was drafted in the 5th round by the Kansas City Chiefs, who went to high school at Kearns. He made the roster. Tight end Jackson Hawes from Highland High School. He made the roster for the Buffalo Bills. And then, even though this probably wasn't in question, but I know that there were rumors, but quarterback Zach Wilson from BYU made the Miami Dolphins roster, which is going to be interesting because I don't think that there's any other quarterback wearing the number 0. So if he does see some playing time, it's going to look really weird. I know when I watched his game against the Jaguars, it looked very strange to me, but I mean, that's the evolution of the NFL, and the number 0 is now the quarterback number. Now, for players who didn't make it, unfortunately, this list is a little bit longer than the list of players who made it. But first, you had quarterback Tyler Huntley from Utah. He was cut from the Browns after Kenny Pickett was traded to the Raiders, and the Browns decided that the quarterbacks that they were going to stick with are Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders after they put Deshaun Watson on the PUP list. You then have running back Mekhi Bernard from Utah. He originally signed with the Tennessee Titans, was cut from them, and then signed with the New England Patriots. And then he was cut along with former teammate tight end Cole Fotheringham, which he also played for Utah, was also cut by the New England Patriots. Then you have linebacker Max Tooley from BYU, who was cut from the Vikings. Running back Jaquindon Jackson, who played for Arkansas last season, but also had played for the University of Utah, was also cut by the Jaguars, along with former wide receiver of the Utes, Dorian Singer. Then you have tight end Caleb Lohner, who was the 7th round draft pick for the Denver Broncos, former tight end for the Utah Utes. He was cut. Wide receiver Britton Covey, former Ute, and just recently signed with the Los Angeles Rams. He was cut today. Darius Lassiter, he was signed by the Jaguars, cut by the Jaguars, re-signed by the Jaguars, and then cut once again today. He was a former BYU wide receiver. Defensive tackle Blake Mengelson, he did not make the cut with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who used to play for BYU. Former Utah cornerback Zemiah Vaughn did not make the cut with the Vikings. Junior Tafuna, defensive tackle from the University of Utah, he did not make the cut with the Houston Texans. Offensive lineman Wyatt Bowles from Utah State did not make the cut with the Rams. And then Xavier Carlton, former defensive end from Juan Diego High School, did not make the cut for the Chicago Bears. So it's very unfortunate that there are more players that are on that cut list. I will say a majority of those players, when I did see the rumors for the cuts for them, a lot of them said that the teams were hoping that they were not claimed on waivers in the next 24 hours, so then they could have them available on their practice squad. I know guys like Caleb Lohner, Darius Lassiter, Xavier Carlton, Junior Tafuna. Those were the bigger names that I saw where the rumors said the organizations hoped that they didn't get picked up by another team in the next 24 hours so they could sign them to their practice squad. So even though they aren't on the 53-man roster by that deadline, it doesn't mean that their football careers are over. So just a good thing to keep in mind. But that is enough of football. I know that we said that this is going to be a college football edition of Being on the Scene, but I do want to mention the Ultimate Goalie Showdown for one last time, as it will be going on this Friday, August 29th. It was just announced that local NHL legend and Stanley Cup champion for the Los Angeles Kings, Trevor Lewis, will be participating in this event. So go to ultimategoalie.com where you can purchase your tickets to either be a spectator, you can be a participant. We want this to be as big as possible, and you're going to have a lot of people within the community that are going to be doing really cool things at this event. Ryan Beckman, who has coordinated this entire thing, he's mentioned a few different changes that have been made since I was down in Arizona for the inaugural version of this event. This event too will also be streamed online on YouTube. As soon as I figure out that link, I will put a tweet out there so then you guys can watch it if you're unable to attend in person. But again, ultimately, great event for a great cause. Amazing people getting involved, and our friends Cole Bagley, along with his entire Utah Hockey Pod group, is going to be involved now. You have the Puck Drop guys, along with the Utah Puck Report with Jay Stevens. Again, a lot of really cool people are going to be involved in this event. So if you are free that Friday night, I know everybody's prepping for Saturday because of college football, but all of the Utah-based games are going to be later in the day. So why not spend Friday night not only being at a really cool event, but doing it for a really good cause? So again, go to ultimategoalie.com if you would like to be involved. But that being said, that is another episode of Being on the Scene, and y'all enjoy the rest of your day.